Hi friends, it's Cindy from Greetings and Memories, back with another installment of my Basics series. In the first 3 videos in this series, we covered stamps, ink, and paper. So once you have those 3 ingredients, what's next? What else do you need? Well, today we're going to talk about the basic tools that will make your crafting easier and give you good results. We're going to talk about those that I use for just about every project, the ones that I consider my must-haves. There's a lot of other gadgets that are available, but we're going to boil it down to those things that I think you really need to have. So I was going to just show you the products and not really do any stamping. I wasn't going to make a card, but then I decided, oh, what the heck, I might as well. Since I had this little piece from my last video laying on my desk, I thought I'd go ahead and put it to use. And so I've grabbed a die cut that I can use for the greeting. I've got that mint macaroon piece already stamped, and then I'm going to layer it up with some Just Jade and some pretty peacock cardstock. So that's what I'm going to use to create with this video. But let me move those aside because I want to show you one of the items that I consider one of my must-have tools is the Stampin' Up! Grid paper. And I was going to put out a nice, fresh, clean sheet, but then I thought, what the heck? This one shows you how I actually use it. So you'll see there's ink on here because I put that down to protect the surface that I'm stamping on. So I can stamp off of the edge of my cardstock, or if I get a little bit of glue or something on there, I'm not messing up my desk underneath. And then you'll see over on the side here, one of the other things I use it for is after I've stamped, I'll go and stamp on my paper a little bit to clean some of the excess ink off before I go to the actual stamp cleaner to help that not get dirty so fast. So a couple of things I wanted to show you with the grid paper is that, well, first of all, it's double-sided. The one side has imperial measurements, so you'll have your inches and the increments on this side. And then on the other side, it has metric measurements. So if that's which you're used to working with, you just use the other side of the paper. But to go back to the side with the inches that I'm used to using, one of the things I use that for is if I want to quick check my measurements, I can just pop my piece of cardstock on there and go, oh, okay, I made that one 3 inches by 4 1/4. So I know what I'm doing with that. And then the next tool that I'll take that back. If you work exclusively with our all-inclusive kits, you're not going to need to cut anything because all those pieces come with pre-made card bases and die cuts you can just punch out. You're not going to need the paper trimmer. But if you're doing anything else, you are going to need the paper trimmer. And I realized as I was setting up here, if I turn it this way, you can't see the whole thing. So I had to turn it this way so you can see it. This is the latest version of the Stampin' Up! Paper trimmer. A couple of things I wanted to show you is that it does have 17 inches this way, so you can easily place your 12 by 12 papers and cardstocks on here to cut. It goes out to just over 6 inches across this way, but then for your larger papers, it does have the extendable arm so that that also goes out past 17 inches. It has, and that does slide in and lock into place for storage. It also has measurements at the top, at the bottom, and midway so that you can check measurements on your smaller pieces. These lines are spaced 1/4 of an inch apart, so that also helps you keep your cardstock straight and even while you're cutting. And it does have both the imperial and the metric measurements on there. I have to share that one of the other demonstrators that I was participated in a workshop with a couple of weeks ago, she put washi tape across the metric measurements and covered them up so that she wouldn't accidentally line her paper up in the wrong spot and confuse herself in the middle of a project. So that's something that you can do if you need to. Also, there is a covering over these. That's an improvement over the old paper cutter that I had from years ago. Those numbers aren't going to wear off. That's something that happened with my 15-year-old paper cutter, is that some of the markings started to disappear after a while. That's not going to happen with this because it does have a protective layer over those markings. And then the part that you need to see is the lift up arm here, so that you slide your paper into place. And it has two blades on here, although I wouldn't necessarily call this one a blade, but it has the darker one is your cutting blade. That one's going to actually cut your cardstock. And then the lighter colored one is your scoring blade. So you can put the score lines and creases to make folding your projects easier. Oh, and the other thing is, I don't know if you can see it here. There's a little spot here where there's an opening so that you can slide those out. If you want to remove it, you use that little notch to slide it in and out. The scoring piece should never need replacing, but we do offer replacement blades for the cutting blade. If you notice after a while that you're not getting crisp cuts, if you're getting fuzzy edges, then it's time to go ahead and replace that. But so, put this in action here for you. I said this was 3 inches by 4 1/4 inches. So I want to take my Just Jade cardstock here and make it 1/4 of an inch bigger. So I'm going to do that 3 1/4 by 4 1/2. And you can see that I'm lining it up, that line that goes all the way down the page, or down the trimmer, helps me get that lined up. And then I'll turn it and cut it at 4 1/2. So that one's the scrap, and this is the one that we're going to use. And then for my card base, I'm going to cut along the 11-inch side at 5 1/2 inches. And then get that cutting blade back out of the way there. And I will score it halfway along the 8 1/2 inch side. So I'll be scoring it at 4 1/4 inches. Oh, and something that I wanted to point out too, that's something that I did wrong for the longest time until I found out. I don't know if you can see there how once I've scored it, it's got an indent on this side and a raised line on this side. And you would think that the indent would go on the inside. That's the way I did it for the longest time. But I found out that actually it's easier to fold it the other way. The reason being that that indent has stretched those fibers and made it so that it's easier to fold it this way. And then another tool that I use for all my cards, because you can see how I did that and kind of press it with my fingers, but it still doesn't really lay flat. If I take my bone folder, which this one is all yellowed and stained because this is the bone folder that I've been using for 15 years. If I use that bone folder and go over that fold line, see how that lays perfectly flat now? And that, you know, maybe that's not such a big deal on your cards, but if you're doing any boxes or 3D projects, that type of thing, it's really important to get a really good crease there. So that's another one of my tools that I consider a must-have. And now I'll just quickly assemble these layers here. We will be talking about adhesives in the next video. So, but I am using the Stampin' Seal for this. And just stick that down. Put a little adhesive on this layer. Oh, get it going there again. And need a little more over here. Okay. Okay, we'll set that to the side because the next tool I want to talk about that you're going to need is our clear acrylic blocks. And now again, if you are using the paper pumpkin kits, you will have the paper pumpkin acrylic block, but you'll see that that's a thinner block. The acrylic blocks that are in the catalog are thicker and have a grooved grip on there. So I just wanted you to know the difference between the two. So if you've received this one and you're looking at the others and thinking, well, what do I need those for? There is an advantage to that. It is a little easier to grip. So I wanted you to see the difference between the two. And those come in multiple sizes. I'll show you my, my assortment here. We generally recommend that you're going to stamp with the stamp on the smallest block that it will fit on. The reason being that then you're not going to do what we call catching edges, where if you have it on too large of a block, you'll get ink around the edge of the block and then possibly transfer that onto your cardstock. And you're also less likely to accidentally rock the stamp and get blurry images if you're using a smaller block. But that said, I do want to let you know that, I know not everybody's going to spring for the whole set at once like I did. Although if you do, you get a 10% bundle discount by purchasing all the blocks at the same time. But if that's not an option for you, I would say probably the block I would recommend starting out with would be the D. There are going to be a few stamps that are going to be too big for that one, but I think for the majority, I'd say probably 80% of the time, you're going to be able to use the D block as your starter. And then again, this case is a separate purchase. That's not something that I consider a must-have, but I got it just because it makes it a little easier for me if I need to transport the blocks to a workshop if and when we're ever allowed to do that again once we receive a vaccine for COVID. So move that out of the way. And I'm using the C block for this project because that was the smallest one that this would fit on. I tried some of the other ones and it just was a little too close to the edge for my liking. And going back to the grid paper, I think I showed you in some of the other videos that one of the things I use it for is I use those lines to make sure that I'm getting my stamp straight and then getting my block straight. And, uh-oh, what did I do? I had my little piece of die cut here and I lost it. Oh, here it is. Sit it on a white notebook and you can't see it. So I'll go ahead and ink up the Just Because, and that's part of the Lovely You stamp set that I'm working with this month. That's my featured stamp set for the month. And those little leaves on the background here were from the Lovely You set as well. But okay, so I'm gonna ink up my stamp. Try not to get my head in the way. And then close up this ink pad. The next tool that I recommend everyone have is a way to clean your stamps. Now we offer a couple of different stamp cleaners. The Stamp and Scrub, this is actually, again, a very old one that I've had for years. We do offer that in the catalog still, but it's going to be a little bit different. It's 7 inches square, so it's slightly smaller than the one that I have here. The reason that I like this one is because it has the fibers here. And those fibers are really good for getting into your detailed stamps. If you've got something with a lot of nooks and crannies, those little fibers will get in there and clean it out really well. And I have sprayed that with the Stampin' Mist stamp cleaner. And then I use the dry side to dry it off. And then I always double check, because I'll tell you, the thing that I do not like about this one is that sometimes it does leave some residue on there. And you know, if you stamp it off a couple of times, you're good, no problem. But if you forget to do that, and then you go and try to use it on a light colored ink pad the next time around, you might not be happy. So something new that Stampin' Up! Offers now is the Stampin' Chamois. You've seen me use this in some of my other videos. And it's really just a sponge. It doesn't require any kind of special cleaner. Just put it under water. When it dries out, it is going to get hard as a rock. But when you put it back under the water, then it'll soften up again. And this one will clean your stamps without leaving any kind of residue. So like I said, it's not as good as getting into nooks and crannies, but it does do a really good job of cleaning without leaving any residue on your stamp. So it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. You have to decide which one you think is going to do better for you, but you will want one or the other so that you can clean your stamps. So let me get these out of the way. Put the stamp away. And we'll just quickly finish up this card because I have one last tool that I want to share with you. That is one that I use for maybe not every project, but it's something that I use quite often that I'm very glad that I have. So let me okay. The last tool I wanted to share with you are the snips. And this is, again, the pair that I have had for about 15 years. This is the original pair that I had from way back in the day when I was a demonstrator in a previous life. And they are still quite sharp, still going strong. They are the ones, I don't know, do you guys have a junk drawer scissors that you let everybody else in the family use, and then you have your good scissors that live in your craft room, and if anybody touches them, there are dire consequences? Yeah, these are the ones that I'm the only one allowed to use them. But one little last touch I want to put on this card is I'm going to give it a little bow. Get that tight there. There we go. And then I want to use those scissors. Nice clean cut, no frayed ends. And then I'll use a little glue dot here to glue that on. And again, you've seen me grab a couple of different adhesives here, and we'll talk more in depth about those in the next video. And there is today's card, just something real simple, but with a monochromatic color scheme going there. And to reiterate, my favorite tools that I think everybody needs to have for successful card making. Number 1 is the grid paper. Number 2 is the paper trimmer. Oh, one thing I forgot to point out earlier is it does have a little hole at the top there if you want to hang it on a hook for storage. I slide mine in a drawer, so I don't think about that, but that is there. So that is tool number 2. Tool number 3 is the bone folder. Tool number 4, clear acrylic blocks. Number 5 is a stamp cleaner. Whether you choose to use the Stampin' Scrub or the Stampin' Chamois, you're going to want a way to clean your stamps before you put them away. And then last on my list today are the snips. So there you have it. Those are the products that I consider must-haves that I think a beginner should consider investing in so that you'll have your best results with your projects. And then there's the card that I just made for you. So thanks for joining me. Check back in next time and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about adhesives. Thanks.